While the Prime Minister stands by the deal, Ontario is crying foul as that province fights to insulate its auto sector from Donald Trump's tariff trade war. David Paterson is Ontario's representative to Washington, D.C. Hi, Mr. Paterson. Pleasure to welcome you back to the program. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thanks, Vashi.
I want to try and parse apart, if we could, starting with your own experience talking to people there on the ground, what reaction you're getting to the agreement with China, because we've seen, a more muted one from the president, but less muted from a lot of his delegates. So where does the reaction you're getting fit in there?
Yeah, I think we're going to need a little bit more time to see things play through. We clearly saw some sort of concern expressed from Jameson Greer and from the Transport Secretary Duffy and others. We'll see. Of course, the United States is also trying to manage its relationship and its trade agreements with China. So who knows exactly where all those things stand with the president, but there are an awful lot of people in the United States where national security and China are the end and the beginning of every conversation. And so this has got a lot of people's attention here, and we're going to have to be very careful in terms of managing through, I think.
Has there been a lot of outreach directly to you in light of the announcement?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, we've, and it crosses parties, and it's a really a common denominator here in the United States of anything to do with China and national security. There's a select committee on China, et cetera. And so I'd say the best thing to describe it is to say there are a lot of questions that we need to get at to understand where this is going and what it means.
You mentioned yourself that the president himself has sort of, I guess, a kind way to put it would be a nuanced position on China. My understanding is he's heading there for a trip himself in April. Do you think that will buttress potentially any of the maybe blowback?
I don't know. I mean, what I do know is working with the auto sector here in the United States, there's a lot of concern as well. And I think getting into sort of the issues or the questions that are there, Chinese electric vehicles are obviously subsidized. They're built with $5 an hour labor. They come in at a much lower cost artificially. So for the entire industry across North America, it is kind of a longer term threat. And I think you have to understand that there is the broader auto market, and then there is the more narrow electric vehicle market, which is more focused right now. And so the number of vehicles that we're talking coming into Canada is actually about 30% or more of the Canadian electric vehicle market. So there's a lot of concern from the industry that we're giving a big head start through this in that particular future-oriented part of the market. And so we hear that in the United States as well.
Sorry, my apologies. I wanted to just follow up and ask, because I know the Prime Minister was on the receiving end of those kinds of questions as well. And his response was basically that this was equivalent to the level of cars coming from China back in 2023, and that it adds a cap where there wasn't a cap back then. Is that information providing any assurance to the voices that you're reflecting tonight are concerned, particularly in the U.S. auto sector?
I mean, what I'm hearing from the auto sector, both in Canada and the United States, is that, it's not so much of a cap as something that is planned to grow over a period of time from, 50,000 to 70,000 vehicles over a period of time. And while it's true that that's only 3% of the Canadian auto market overall, that's also 30% of the new car, the electric vehicle market, which is where people need to compete to build the future, and where Canada, frankly, has invested billions in battery plants and in electric car supports to be part of that going forward. So it's a question of, what are we trying to do here in terms of being able to support the jobs that we want to see in the future in these areas. The other area, too, is we don't know. We've heard from the Prime Minister that there may be additional investments coming from China as well. Well, we have a Canada Investment Review Act, which we need to think about. We also need to think about the connectivity of these vehicles to our mobile networks, which is something that's very concerning from a national security point of view. in the United States and in Canada as well. So these are questions that we need to work out together, figure out where we're going on these things. But I think the biggest one is we don't want to see anything that is going to be a real problem in making sure we land the plane of renewing the USMCA agreement. And so we need to be communicating a lot more on this thing.
Yeah, let me ask you about your communication, because I'm sure you'll be aware that the Premier at the political level today was voicing some concern about a lack of communication from the Prime Minister directly to him, or a lack of conversation that's happening at the political level. Is there a difference at the apolitical level, the diplomatic level? Are you engaged, for example, with your federal counterpart on this issue?
No, it was a surprise, and look, we also have canola in Ontario. We care very much about working together across Canada. We care very much about diversifying trade and developing all those things. But given that the auto sector is our largest or second largest sector in Canada, with a whole bunch of jobs, and an important one that's going through technology transition, there are legitimate questions. It may not have been possible to consult before, but it would have been nice.
Does this issue, does your gut tell you whether or not this issue makes its way through what we were speaking about last time, this sort of unfolding of the USMCA review process?
I think it can. I think what it means is let's work together to figure out how this will be implemented. There are many, many questions to figure out in terms of, who gets the quotas, what companies come in, what dealerships would support this, can they drive across borders, national security issues in terms of can they connect to mobile networks. These are all things that will have to be discussed further, and we're getting those questions here from the United States as well. So there's a lot of work to be done. More
broadly, just before I let you go, Mr. Paterson, look, before this job, you had a long history in the auto sector itself. I think there are, based on even my inbox alone, a lot of people who work in that sector who have watched what's unfolded over the last year in conjunction with the news over the past few days, and really wondered about where the sector is heading, what the future of it is. Are you worried about the future of the sector right now based on everything that's unfolded?
Well, I think we're going through a massive period of change. What gives me comfort is to hear the CEOs at General Motors and Ford saying, no, we really need to stand behind the USMCA. We need Canada, we need Mexico. We've seen that in all the submissions to Jameson Greer, but it's sometimes hard to read the president's intentions. We're in a particularly volatile time on that, so we need to communicate. And this is an issue that would be good to get ahead of.
Okay, I will leave it on that note. Mr. Paterson, a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Vashi.